Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. This particular PowerPoint, our objective is to understand competition for control of territory, that's land and resources, raw materials in North America, led to conflicts among colonizing powers. So at this point, this is not just England. Remember, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, they were from New Netherland. They were also interested in colonizing. Remember, European countries, as I just stated, established colonies in North America as a means of increasing wealth and power. England wasn't the only country interested. At this point, you might have thought that. The next slide will show you many trade routes used by various European nations. You're going to want to go ahead and look at this interactive map below to see European trade routes. The red would be the French, green Spanish, purple Dutch. Dutch are, think, New Netherland or the Netherlands, and then the blue will be the English. And in this case, we're talking about early English exploration before Jamestown in 1607. At this point, you're also going to want to look at your worksheet. We're on slide 2 and answer the question. Go back and do slide 1, the question there as well. The English, Spanish, French, and Dutch struggled with each other to control settlement and colonization in North America. Competition for control of territory and resources, that equals conflict. The biggest conflict/war I will highlight will be between the French and the English. This is the French and Indian War. It's called this because England won. They fought the French and the natives, and thus they called it the French and Indian War. Those were the enemies of England. We'll talk more about this war at a different time. But you're going to want to answer slide number 3, the question there, about why the desire for control over territory and resources creates conflict. You'll want to stop and think about that. Let's go ahead and start with the Spanish. We'll only focus on what Spain wanted in North America, not Central or South. That was pretty much last year. If you need any clarification from this, you can see Chapter 3, Section 5. The page numbers are there for your information. Our objectives will be to describe Spain's colony in Florida, explain how Spain established settlements throughout much of North America, and the significance of the Spanish missions. We're on slide 5. Spain's territories north of Mexico were called the borderlands, and their main function was to protect Mexico from other European powers. So again, you're going to want to answer question 5. When you see here this particular map, Spain's empire was Central America. That goes back to Christopher Columbus. South America. But here we see Spanish Florida and a number of these borderland areas pushing way up into modern-day Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona. But again, these are called the borderlands. The vast area of the borderlands has many different kinds of landforms and climates, from humid lowlands to highlands, mountains, and deserts. Again, all these states were part of the borderlands, and these are all, like I said earlier, in North America. Next question is, how did the Spanish establish colonies on the borderlands? While France and England were building colonies in North America, Spain's colonies in the Americas were already hundreds of years old. They had been there, you might very well say, early on. The Spanish established colonies on the borderlands. They built missions, those are churches, presidios, those are forts, and pueblos, those are towns. Early in the 1500s, Spanish explorers reached Florida, but at first they did not build permanent settlements. They feared that France might take over the area. Spain built a fort called St. Augustine in northern Florida. This is the first permanent European settlement in the present-day U.S. Don't confuse this with the first English settlement. That would be Jamestown in 1607. But again, this is the first permanent European settlement. And again, this is through the Spanish. Spanish control was threatened as English colonies spread southward. To weaken the English colonies, in 1693, the Spanish offered refuge and free land to enslaved Africans who escaped to Florida. So as we process through this PowerPoint, remember, we're thinking about competition for control of territory and conflict that this caused. And I want you to kind of see that as we go through the PowerPoint. Spain wanted their control. They felt threatened by the English as they pushed southward. Remember, England eventually created the colony of Georgia to keep the Spanish from attacking South Carolina. To weaken the English colonies, in 1693, the Spanish offered refuge and free land to enslaved Africans who escaped to Florida. So again, this is a way to reduce the slave population in Georgia and Spain. You could see that obviously upset the English. That would be slide number 9. During the 1700s, hundreds of African slaves fled to Florida. And again, they were looking for refuge, for free land. By 1763, there were only 3 major Spanish settlements in the Florida colony. All the settlements were centered around forts, and all were in the north. The Spanish had little control over the rest of Florida. Think of Florida as the very, very north boundary of Spain. Spain's most important colonies were in Mexico and South America. If you look on the map over here, again, these are Spain's most important colonies. But we're not focusing on that as much as in North America. The Native Americans of the region suffered under Spanish rule. In 1680, the natives rebelled and drove the Spanish out. The Spanish did not return for more than 10 years. So this is conflict as well. When we're talking about controlling land, the Native Americans had conflict with the European nations as well. Different groups were fighting for land. Roman Catholic missionaries, this would be Spanish missionaries, played a key role in colonizing the borderlands. They established missions to spread Christianity to the region's Native Americans, although at first they had little success. The only mission that took root in Texas was one that eventually became the city of San Antonio. The Spanish set up presidios to defend their missions. They also set up pueblos, which were centers of farming and trade. Think of these as towns. And these are slides 13 and 14. In the middle of the pueblo was a plaza where people came to do business or worship at a church. Life in Spanish missions, Native American activities. Thousands worked in the missions, farming, building churches, learning crafts. Although they were not overworked, Native Americans did not have control over their lives in the missions. They could be whipped or imprisoned if they violated rules. They often rebelled, obviously, against such treatment. And thousands died because of these poor living conditions. And that would be number 15. So obviously, conflict over land, you very well might make the conclusion, meant less humane treatment for the Native Americans. All right, moving along to the French and the Dutch. If you need to go back and review, the page numbers are at the top. Describe how New France spread into the interior of North America. Explain how the French and Spanish differed in their treatment of the natives. Explain how the Dutch established a thriving colony along the Hudson River. And explain the influence of these settlements on the Native Americans of the region. What was the impact of the establishment of French and Dutch colonies in North America? In the 1600s, England, France, and the Netherlands sent explorers to North America and staked claims to land there. Their activities had grave, negative consequences for the Native Americans who lived in North America. Remember, as I said in an earlier slide, mercantilism wasn't just for England. This was a chart that I had put up earlier. Remember, the colonies, they could only trade with the home country. They would send raw materials to the home country. Remember, the colonies didn't make manufactured products such as clothing and furniture, they sent the raw materials. This was not just an English idea. Spain had colonies in the New World. The Dutch did. The French. The goal was to send raw materials back to the mother country, so they could acquire wealth and be profitable. And this is question number slides 17 and 18. In 1603, French explorer Samuel Champlain made the first of 11 voyages to explore and map the lands along the St. Lawrence River. In 1604, he established the first settlement, a trading post in the colony of New France in present-day Nova Scotia. In 1608, Champlain established the settlement of Quebec along the St. Lawrence River. This time you might be wondering where all those places are. Be good to stop and look. We're talking about, again, modern-day Canada here. We see Quebec. Most people say Quebec, but it's actually Quebec. We can find the St. Lawrence River, which is over here. When we look at various explorers, we can see where they're coming from. So again, New France is again in this whole area. Later, upon exploration of the Mississippi River, again, in other words, finding a trade route all the way to the Gulf, all these, again, being very important to France. Here's a video. Go ahead and click on this and watch about New France. Champlain gave the French an influence in the region that lasted 150 years, and other explorers followed his lead. By 1670, French missionary Jacques Marquette had founded 2 missions along the Great Lakes in present-day Michigan. So again, the French had the idea of missions to Christianize the natives as well. In 1673, Father Marquette and French-Canadian trader Louis Joliet explored Lake Michigan and the Mississippi River. They had thought the Mississippi River might be the long-sought Northwest Passage, but they soon changed their minds. However, the two did discover a water route into the heart of North America. The exploration of the Mississippi was completed in 1682 by Cavelier or La Salle. If we look at the map here, these are earlier French claims, the purple area. Again, he reached the river's mouth at the Gulf of New Mexico and claimed the entire Mississippi Valley for France and named the region Louisiana. The next slide will show that a little clearer, but early on, again, the purple belonging to France, obviously the Atlantic coast, the green to England, Spain, of which we talked about already. And again, these would be nomadic lands here. But again, this water route, the Mississippi, again, that was a gold mine. That's how you got your materials. That's how you got your materials down to a water source to be traded away. And again, later years of French exploration, blue being France, again, you could see that France had a pretty massive empire in North America. Again, the orange belonging to Spain, the red belonging to Great Britain. And again, we see that land claims often were changed hands over time about who owned what. As I said earlier, ultimately, when we look over here, we can see that just by common sense, these are the English colonies. They're going to want to drive westward for expansion. France doesn't really have... Hold on, let me go back. France doesn't have anywhere to go save trade their goods down to the Gulf of Mexico, as I said in the last slide. And again, unless they were to push the English out and drive them out, which would be very unlikely. So you can just smell the tension between the English and the French at this point. The colony of New France developed quite differently than did New Spain. The Spanish, who wanted gold and silver, forced Native Americans into harsh labor. Again, at this point, we're on to slide number 26. The French, who wanted fish and furs, traded with Native Americans for the animal skins they sold in Europe. So these are vastly different. You might very well label the Spanish as literally they wanted and desired gold. They enslaved natives into harsh labor. Now, this is only my opinion, but I think the Spanish probably treated the natives the worst out of any of the people groups. The French probably treated them the best. They tended to, they built fewer cities and they did more trading with the natives, of which they sold, these animal skins back in Europe. The English, again, it depended on how the natives were treated, but obviously with England's desire for land, there were plenty of conflicts over land between the natives and the English. Champlain convinced Native Americans to bring pelts or furs to French trading posts. Trading posts such as Quebec City and Montreal became busy centers of commerce. That means trade. So if you want to label the French, think of them as a lot of trading and trapping in North America. The English, on the other hand, were there to stay. They built permanent cities. They were there permanently. Spain also was interested, but more so for gold and for missions. But again, remember, Spain's bigger empire was Central and South America, not as much North America. Courrier de Bois acquired pelts from Native Americans, and many of them married Native American women and started families. Okay, now the last group, the Dutch. These are from the Netherlands. Dutch explorer Henry Hudson hoped to discover a northwest passage that would allow a ship to cross the entirety of the North American continent and gain access to the Pacific Ocean, and from there to India. So again, obviously north and west. Making his way as far as present-day Albany, this is New York, before the river became too shallow for ships to continue north, Hudson returned to Europe and claimed the entire Hudson River Valley for his Dutch employers. The trade was so profitable that the Dutch West India Company established a colony in what the Dutch called New Netherland. So we read about this when we talked about the middle colonies and how the conflict came. When we look over here at the blue, the Dutch colonization, English colonization, and how that's eventually going to clash with the Dutch. And eventually New York, this whole area will be given up to the English. New Albany, in 1624, about 300 settlers arrived from the Netherlands. Most of them settled at Fort Orange, later named New Albany, and then in New Amsterdam. In 1626, another group settled at the mouth of the Hudson River on land purchased from Native Americans. The colonists named their new home New Amsterdam. By 1653, it had a population of 800. The slow expansion of New Netherland, however, caused conflicts with both English colonists and Native Americans in the region. Remember, the more different people groups, the nationalities that came into the region, there was more desire for land, to control the land, to own the land, and to trade and sell from the land. That caused conflicts among these European powers, which of course caused conflict with the natives. Go ahead and watch this video below about the Dutch and New Netherland. New Netherland kept English settlers from moving westward. Again, England desired to move west, and then they would find the Dutch and later the French in their way. Ultimately, as you know, the English will be victorious over the Dutch. They'll also be victorious over the French. That's the main war that we'll highlight a little bit down the road. That's called the French and Indian War. England will win that war against France. France will pretty much lose everything in North America, and that'll pave the way for the English to continue to go out west. At this point, the colonists feel very secure about their standing in the world. This will in turn cause conflict between the settlers or the colonists with the home country of England. And then this, of course, will be the American Revolution. Again, in 1664, English forces seized New Netherland and renamed it New York. So the Dutch, in a sense, aren't in North America as long as the French, the Spanish, and the English. Native Americans traded fur pelts to the French and Dutch in exchange for goods such as cloth, iron pots, and tools and guns. Ultimately, however, the fur trade had grave or negative effects on Native Americans. Disease, war, lost food and land. This was all the result of conflict. And again, this would be more of slide number 34. Native Americans were weakened by diseases they caught from the Europeans. Sickness spread quickly because Native Americans had no immunity to European diseases. Immunity meant Europeans, they were introduced to the disease, they had been sick at one time, their body was used to it. When they were introduced to the sickness somewhere, their body had defenses already built up in their bodies to fight and to defend. The natives, on the other hand, weren't used to any of these diseases, and they just got bombarded, and that resulted literally in millions of deaths. More conflict would be between the French and Dutch. They made alliances or friendships with different tribes who were enemies. The French allied themselves with the Hurons, and the Dutch were allied with the Iroquois. Again, this created conflict, but not only between the French and Dutch, but also it split the Native American community. The Iroquois attacked the Hurons with guns they got from the Dutch. All right, so as we wind down, our objective for this PowerPoint, competition for control of territory, that's land and resources, raw materials in North America, led to conflicts among colonizing powers. Again, the colonizing powers were the English, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch. Go ahead and watch this video review below. This will kind of summarize a little bit of what's going on. It'll go further into history as far as England will prevail over the other nations. And as I said earlier, the English colonists will soon break away from England in the American Revolution. So go ahead and watch this video at this point in time. All right, thanks. And make sure you tidied up your questions on your sheet. Good job.